The man, a hulking shadow moving with predatory grace, stood menacingly near the dimly lit brick wall of an alley entrance, and Ethan Hayes, a 30-something former construction worker, now a rideshare driver, saw the lethal glint of the knife blade as it caught the harsh, cold reflection of the downtown Chicago street lamp, instantly chilling the blood in his veins when he pulled his aging sedan, a beaten-up Ford Fusion, to the curb directly outside the Gilded Bistro, an expensive restaurant, where his intoxicated passenger had just stumbled out. This passenger, Charlotte Vance, a woman in her late 30s, dressed in a designer cocktail dress, had been incoherently slurring an address into her phone moments earlier, now froze utterly, her expensive handbag slipping forgotten from her fingers as she sighted the figure lurking near the greasy alley, and Ethan was instantly out of his car, slamming the door with an unexpected echo in the quiet street, before his logical mind could even process the sheer danger of the unfolding situation. He instinctively shouted, "Get back inside!" His voice rough and laced with the adrenaline already coursing through him, positioning his body, big and solid, built from years of manual labor, deliberately between the terrified woman and the man dissolving in the deep shadows. But Charlotte didn't move an inch, instead remaining tragically motionless as her eyes, wide and glazed, suddenly sober, were locked onto the waiting figure, her face a mask of ghastly, bone-white terror, a fear far older and deeper than simple drunken anxiety, a primal terror that clearly indicated a trauma that had been silently festering inside her for years. Charlotte, the man, tall, lean, and utterly menacing, spoke the name with a terrifying calm, his voice quiet, almost intimate and disturbingly loving, which only served to amplify the sheer horror of the moment for Ethan, who felt his stomach turn over with the grim realization that this was no random opportunistic mugger, the kind he had occasionally dealt with in his old neighborhood, but rather something deeply personal, something fueled by a decades-old, cold-blooded revenge. As the assailant took a deliberate step forward from the oppressive shadows, adding, "You didn't really think I wouldn't eventually find you, did you?" The sudden, absolute coldness of the scenario, the premeditation, the chilling familiarity, caused Ethan's blood to instantly run frigid, immediately grasping the gravity of the fact that this was a targeted, execution-style rendezvous, not a simple robbery. So, he repeated his command, his voice now dangerously low and firm. I said, "Get inside!" Simultaneously grabbing Charlotte's arm, it was surprisingly frail and cold, and shoving her violently toward the heavy, ornate double doors of the brightly lit restaurant entrance. She thankfully stumbled but quickly moved, her high heels, expensive, delicate things, clicking a frantic, desperate rhythm on the unforgiving pavement, an utterly panicked sound of flight, while the man with the razor-sharp knife, moving with silent, deliberate intent, stepped closer to Ethan, his eyes devoid of any recognizable human emotion, and offered a chilling final warning. "This isn't your damn business, friend. Just walk away and you get to live." A threat to which Ethan could only internalize his 7-year-old daughter's face, her bright, trusting eyes, waiting innocently at home, knowing that if he chose to walk away, this woman would certainly die, a moral calculation he simply couldn't make, deciding then and there to pay the ultimate price. Can't do that, then you die too. Ethan Hayes had been in numerous brutal fights throughout his turbulent life, having been forged in the unforgiving crucible of poverty-stricken neighborhoods, and having essentially raised himself following his father's sudden, devastating departure, surviving the unforgiving floors of hot, dangerous factories where hardened men routinely settled complex disputes with raw fists and broken bodies, and he certainly knew how to competently handle himself in a close-quarters confrontation, often relying on his size and sheer, brute strength. But the presence of a large, gleaming knife drastically altered the equation, signaling a terrifying and absolute readiness for cold-blooded, intentional murder, a dimension of violence he had never before faced, and in that split second, he registered his complete lack of a proper weapon. He had only his car keys, useless, his old phone, dead, and the overwhelming, terrifying reality of Lily, his 7-year-old daughter, his entire reason for existing, waiting patiently at his sister's cramped apartment, implicitly trusting that her dad would unfailingly come home alive, as he always did. This profound need for self-preservation clashed violently with the moral imperative of the distressed woman behind him, who would unquestionably be silenced forever if he chose the path of retreat. A terrifying equation that cemented his unwavering decision not to walk away from this fight. His final, desperate thought being a silent apology to Lily, a promise that he would try his best. Therefore, before he could further rationalize the suicidal nature of his action, Ethan let out a guttural roar and charged, choosing sheer aggression over caution, driven purely by that tiny girl's face, a powerful force of nature unleashed, fueled by love, knowing that ordinary people can become truly extraordinary heroes in a heartbeat. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from. If you believe that real strength means protecting someone who can't protect themselves, hit subscribe now, because only cowards scroll past a story like this. With a primal, life-saving surge of adrenaline, Ethan Hayes executed a perfectly timed move, charging forward like a desperate, powerful bull, driving his heavy shoulder low and hard directly into the attacker's midsection, aiming for the diaphragm, a memory from a long-ago high school wrestling class, before the gleaming knife, poised, ready to strike, could even complete its deadly, downward arc. The impact of his heavy body a sickening, explosive collision that slammed both men violently against the cold, unforgiving alley wall, sending rusted garbage cans, full of restaurant waste, scattering dramatically, their contents spilling onto the wet concrete and dislodging the lethal blade, which clattered loudly and disappeared with a final, ominous metallic ring. Somewhere into the black, grimy darkness, Ethan immediately threw a frantic, desperate flurry of punches, completely blindly, driven by sheer instinct and raw desperation. Aiming savagely for the jaw, the ribs, and any part of the man's body where he could establish a solid connection, a brutal, messy street fight fueled by the purest need to survive. However, the attacker was also a formidable, experienced fighter, immediately retaliating with vicious force, landing a blinding, bone-jarring fist squarely on Ethan's temple, causing a sudden, dizzying shower of painful, exploding stars to burst across his vision, followed by another agonizing blow that cracked against his exposed ribs, leaving a bitter, coppery taste of blood instantly filling his mouth. Despite the searing pain, Ethan possessed a crucial, non-physical advantage the other man completely lacked. A deeply ingrained, overwhelming reason to win this fight, a reason embodied by the thought of his little Lily, 7 years old, a tiny universe of trust, waiting innocently at his sister's apartment, trusting absolutely that her daddy would eventually return home as he always, reliably, did. This powerful thought solidified his iron resolve. He absolutely could not, would not, die here tonight. Fueled by the ferocious, all-consuming thought of Lily's innocent face and her unwavering trust, Ethan channeled his last remaining reservoir of pure, desperate energy, letting out another fierce, primal roar that silenced the street. And with a superhuman effort, he violently slammed the attacker's head against the cold, unyielding brick wall once, then a second time with sickening finality, the sound a dull, heavy thud that instantly ended the brutal confrontation. The assailant's body immediately went completely limp, his menacing presence dissolving as he crumpled heavily and silently to the wet, filthy ground like a discarded puppet, leaving Ethan standing alone in the alley, utterly defeated by exhaustion, gasping desperately for ragged breaths, his knuckles split open and profusely bleeding, his ribs screaming 1,000 sharp complaints with every shallow inhalation, the physical toll of the violent, desperate encounter finally catching up to him. Behind him, the unmistakable, rising wail of police sirens began to pierce the quiet night air, indicating that someone, likely Charlotte or a quick-thinking restaurant employee, had successfully called the authorities, and he turned slightly to see the silhouette of Charlotte Vance, the woman he had just saved. Standing completely framed in the bright, distant doorway of the restaurant, her phone, a tiny rectangle of light, held precariously in her trembling, sweat-slicked hand, hot tears now, streaming freely down her previously terrified face. "He's down?" Ethan managed to rasp out, the words painful and rough, "You're safe now." Before the total exhaustion, the searing pain, and the massive adrenaline dump simultaneously overcame his remaining strength, his legs suddenly and completely giving out beneath him, plunging his world immediately into a vast, comforting, and absolute blackness as he collapsed next to the unconscious attacker. A dull, throbbing pain, a constant, inescapable reminder of the alley fight, dragged Ethan Hayes back to consciousness, and he blinked slowly, his eyes trying to adjust to the shockingly bright, unfamiliar surroundings, gradually registering that he was lying in a hospital bed, one that was conspicuously private, luxurious, and clearly very expensive, a stark contrast to the charity wards he'd been in before, featuring elegant fresh flowers, white lilies, ironically, arranged perfectly on a polished mahogany nightstand, and a massive panoramic window that offered a stunning, high-up view of the sprawling Chicago cityscape all the way to the blue-gray distant lakefront. His sister, Janine Hayes, a practical, tough woman a few years older with his father's stubborn chin, was quietly sitting in a comfortable armchair position beside him, her eyes visibly red and puffy from a recent bout of crying. A deeply worried expression etched permanently onto her face, confirming his worst fear that the incident had profoundly affected his family. "Lily," Ethan croaked out the single, most important word, his throat dry and rough as sandpaper, his mind immediately leaping to his daughter's welfare. "She's fine, Colton," Janine immediately reassured him, quickly leaning forward to grasp his hand. Her touch was firm and reassuring. "She's safely with Mom, and she only knows Daddy had a little accident at work," before sharply demanding, "What the hell happened, Ethan? The police said you fought off some kind of psycho with a massive knife." He immediately attempted to sit up, a foolish attempt driven by a sudden spike of anxiety, but a massive lance of white-hot, agonizing pain instantly shot through his cracked ribs, forcing a groan and making him immediately lie back down, momentarily defeated and utterly breathless. Ignoring the searing, acute pain shooting through his bruised ribs, Ethan immediately focused on the passenger who had been the entire reason for his potentially fatal encounter, his mind still working to process the gravity of the situation, and he weakly asked his sister, "My passenger? The woman? Is she truly okay?" Janine's expression instantly shifted from sheer worry to a strange, almost impressed awe, and she leaned conspiratorially closer, speaking in a low, astonished whisper, "Oh, Ethan, she's a lot more than just okay. She's been sitting in the waiting room for nearly 6 full hours, refusing to leave until you finally woke up," adding a dramatic pause before delivering the staggering revelation. "Ethan, do you actually know who she is? She told the police her name was Charlotte. Charlotte Thornton. Your damn boss. The CEO of the entire freight company you work for." Ethan could only stare blankly at his sister, his expression a mix of disbelief and utter confusion, his brain desperately trying to reconcile the terrified, vulnerable woman he had shielded with the infamous public persona of Charlotte Thornton. Charlotte Thornton was a notorious, almost mythical figure in the Chicago business world, often referred to universally as the Ice Queen of Thornton Logistics, the kind of ruthless corporate leader who was legendary for never smiling, never offering a single word of praise or genuine acknowledgement, and never, ever displaying even a remote ounce of human empathy or genuine weakness. He had personally worked diligently in her massive, impersonal warehouse for 3 grueling years and had never once seen her look like anything other than cold, impeccably polished, and utterly unapproachable. Yet the woman whose life he had just saved had been visibly shattered, terrified, and painfully, humanly vulnerable. "She wants desperately to see you now," Janine murmured, her tone respectful and cautious, clearly waiting for his final decision. "Should I actually let the CEO of Thornton Logistics into your hospital room?" Ethan, still completely lost in the swirling, confusing mixture of disbelief and shock, unable to fully process the bizarre, sudden merging of his gritty life with her high-powered, wealthy one. Ethan simply nodded weakly, giving his reluctant consent, knowing that this strange, terrifying chapter couldn't truly close until he spoke with the woman who was both his corporate overlord and his co-survivor, and his sister quietly slipped out of the room, her sensible shoes making a soft click on the pristine tile floor. The door swung open silently, and Charlotte Thornton, the Ice Queen herself, walked deliberately inside, her entrance instantly filling the small, sterile room with an air of immense wealth and subdued power. But she looked noticeably and profoundly different in the clear, merciless light of morning. Still meticulously polished, wearing expensive, understated designer clothing and flawless makeup that couldn't quite conceal the strain. Yet her eyes were distinctly softer, redder, and deeply bruised, a telltale sign that she had been silently weeping for many hours, revealing the profound, internal damage of the previous night's trauma. "Mr. Hayes," she began quietly, her voice a low, husky sound, utterly devoid of its usual corporate crispness. "Ethan, may I please sit down for a moment?" He managed a small, pained gesture toward the very chair Janine had just vacated, and his sister, sensing the profound need for privacy, slipped soundlessly out, pulling the heavy, intimidating door gently closed behind her. Charlotte sat down slowly, her posture rigid and controlled, her hands folded tightly in her lap, and for a long, agonizing moment, she simply remained silent, her intense, unreadable gaze fixed directly on his injured, battered face. The intense silence stretched painfully between them, heavy with unspoken danger, profound gratitude, and the overwhelming weight of the shared, brutal trauma they had both just experienced, until finally, Charlotte Thornton broke the quiet with a simple, devastating observation. Her voice laced with a thick layer of disbelief. "You almost truly died for me, Ethan." He attempted to quickly downplay the heroic, life-threatening nature of his actions, his working-class humility kicking in instantly, offering the expected simple response. "I just did what any decent person would have done in that situation, ma'am." But she sharply cut him off, shaking her perfectly styled head slowly, her composure instantly cracking as a profound emotion, something close to anguish, flashed in her eyes. "No," she stated firmly, her voice trembling with intense conviction. "You absolutely didn't. Most people, Ethan, would have instantly driven away, choosing self-preservation above all else. Most would have called 911 and kept their desperate distance, hoping the police would arrive in time." Her gaze intensified, completely unwavering, as she meticulously articulated the magnitude of his selfless choice. "You deliberately chose to put your own body directly between me and a man who had only one single, lethal objective: to brutally kill me." She then swallowed hard, her throat visibly convulsing as she forced the crucial question past the emotional barrier, the question that truly mattered to her. "Why, Ethan? Why would you do such a thing?" Ethan paused, deeply considering his answer, thinking about his daughter Lily, about his late wife Megan, and about the endless, exhausting years he'd spent relentlessly trying to keep his family's head financially above water in a cruel world. Recalling the exact, terrifying moment he had first seen the glint of the deadly knife, and the split-second, non-negotiable choice his heart had instantly made without any conscious, rational thought. "Because you desperately needed someone's help," Ethan finally responded simply, his voice quiet, rough, and completely honest, the raw truth hanging heavy in the air. "And I was right there in that moment, available to give it." With those few, unadorned words of pure, selfless humanity, Charlotte's carefully maintained, corporate composure instantly and completely shattered into a million emotional pieces, the dam of her decade-long emotional repression finally bursting, as hot, uncontrollable tears abruptly spilled over her red-rimmed eyes, silently running tracks through her expensive makeup, and she instantly pressed a trembling, manicured hand tightly over her mouth in a desperate, failed attempt to stifle a raw, guttural sob that still managed to escape. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," she whispered hoarsely, her voice thick with immediate remorse and profound guilt. "I am truly so sorry. You don't even remotely know who I am, and you nearly died brutally for me, and I just can't. I truly don't know how to handle or process this level of selflessness." "Hey!" Ethan gently reached out his hand, his split, bruised knuckles, physical evidence of his sacrifice, brushing lightly against her perfectly tailored sleeve, instantly offering a gesture of pure, unforced comfort. "I'm absolutely okay. I just have a couple of cracked ribs and a few nasty bruises, ma'am. Trust me. I've honestly had much worse beatings from drunken bar fights back in my reckless 20s. He added with a tiny, pained smile, a brief moment of self-deprecating humor intended to ease her clear distress. She responded with a broken, choked laugh that was filled with tears, a sound that was profoundly damaged yet undeniably real and human, a sound he realized she probably hadn't made in a very, very long time. The shared, fragile moment of humor instantly vanished, replaced by a sudden, intense seriousness, and Ethan, now adopting a more careful, investigative tone. Asked the inevitable question that had been haunting him since the alley. The man? You clearly knew him, didn't you? Charlotte's face immediately lost all remaining color, turning a shocking, ghostly pale, and she slowly looked down at her hands, which were now trembling uncontrollably, avoiding his direct gaze as she forced the dark, painful truth from her lips. His name is Victor Crane, she whispered, the name itself a venomous snake. He is my ex-husband. Her voice instantly dropped to a raw, barely audible whisper, thick with ancient, deep-seated fear and trauma, as the rest of her horrifying, untold history spilled out in a rush, a painful, decade-old confession. He almost brutally killed me 10 years ago. He savagely beat me so badly that I was hospitalized, completely dependent on machines, for nearly 2 full months afterward. Victor had been immediately sent to prison, a maximum security facility with a long, punitive sentence of 20 full years, a term that Charlotte had built her new, cold life around, believing implicitly that she was safely protected by the system's longevity. But then the unexpected, terrifying loophole. But he somehow got out early, she concluded with a bitter, cynical laugh that held no humor. Early release. Good behavior. The parole board called it. A brutal mockery of justice that Victor had mercilessly exploited. He spent 10 solid years meticulously pretending to be completely reformed, putting on a perfect show for the system, just so he could be released early and finally finish the deadly job he had originally started. A cold, burning surge of pure, protective rage instantly ignited in Ethan's chest. A profound sense of injustice on behalf of this terrified woman who was not at all the Ice Queen everyone believed her to be, and he pressed her for more details, his voice tightly controlled. How long has he been relentlessly stalking you, Charlotte? Her eyes, now red and raw from the trauma and crying, looked up at him with a bleak, desperate hopelessness, and she replied, 3 agonizing weeks now. It started subtly. I began receiving strange, untraceable envelopes containing only photos of myself. Me at work in my office, me dining at different restaurants, me completely alone at home. No messages at all, just terrifying photos, each one a stark, chilling reminder that he was always near. She continued, describing the sheer, suffocating terror of knowing she was constantly watched by a predator who had absolute, lethal intent. I knew instantly it was him, she admitted, wiping a fresh wave of tears away with a weary hand. I knew the moment I saw the first photo that he was definitely coming to kill me. The final, terrifying escalation occurred just the night before. Last night, I received a photo of myself walking into the Gilded Bistro. It was clearly time-stamped only 5 minutes before I actually arrived. I knew with absolute certainty he was not just watching, but actively waiting in the shadows. The crushing weight of the constant, relentless surveillance and the terrifying knowledge of his immediate proximity had finally shattered her, causing her carefully constructed defenses to fail. I simply couldn't handle the crushing pressure anymore. I drank far too much, far too fast, and I called for a rideshare to take me home, desperately hoping that if I could just make it inside my apartment, I would somehow be safe. He was waiting specifically for you? Ethan observed, the terrifying realization of how close they had both come to absolute disaster settling heavily over the quiet room. Yes, Charlotte whispered, her voice cracking audibly under the weight of the profound guilt she was feeling for inadvertently dragging him into her violent nightmare. And if you hadn't been there, Ethan, I would be dead now. She then looked at him again, her eyes, ringed in red, completely unmasked, searching seeking the truth behind his selfless action, needing to understand the man who had risked everything. Why, Ethan? She repeated the crucial question, her voice tinged with a deep, personal perplexity. You have a child. I saw your employee file when I promoted you this morning. The word promoted seemed like an afterthought, lost in the seriousness of the conversation. Lily, 7 years old. You are absolutely all she has in this entire world. Why would you so recklessly risk your very life, your most precious asset, for a complete and total stranger like me? Ethan's mind immediately filled with vivid, loving images of his small daughter, tucking her little body into bed each night, the quiet, comforting ritual of reading her a slightly too old story, the joyful, messy scene of making his signature extra cheese pancakes every single Sunday morning, and the unparalleled, absolute joy of the way she would instantly drop everything and run, her arms outstretched, toward him the very moment he walked through the door after a long, exhausting shift, acting as though he was the most magnificent, incredible, and most important sight she had ever witnessed in her entire short life. Because if something that terrible, that brutal, ever happened to my daughter, Ethan explained quietly, his voice carrying the deep, profound conviction of a loving parent, I would want, more than anything in the world, someone like me, someone decent and brave, to be there for her, willing to risk everything to protect her. Charlotte Thornton simply stared at him, motionless, absorbing the sheer, unadulterated purity of his answer. A realization that was completely divorced from the cold, ruthless corporate world she inhabited, and a palpable, internal shift occurred in her fiercely guarded expression. Something profound that looked startlingly like the dawning of genuine hope, a feeling she had ruthlessly stamped out a decade ago. I've spent 10 agonizing years relentlessly building these massive walls around myself, she finally confessed, her voice thick with the acknowledgement of her own deeply flawed survival mechanism. 10 years ensuring that absolutely no one could ever get close enough to me again to inflict that kind of terrifying, irreparable damage. I deliberately became emotionally cold because that calculated coldness felt like the only possible, absolute form of safety. I pushed people away ruthlessly because pushing was undeniably easier than the excruciating, terrifying risk of trusting anyone ever again. She took a deep, shaky breath, the act itself an immense effort. You, Ethan, are the very first person who has genuinely protected me since my beloved father passed away suddenly when I was just 16. And I truly don't know what to do with that profound, uncomfortable feeling. Ethan gently squeezed her arm, offering a simple, grounding command. You don't have to do anything right now, Charlotte. Just focus relentlessly on staying safe and allowing yourself to heal. Let the police handle Victor. That's their job, not yours. I will focus on safety, Charlotte instantly replied, her determination snapping back into place. But there is something else critically important that I absolutely need to do first, Ethan. What is that? He asked, sensing a deep, powerful resolve in her voice that was familiar to him from his years of working for her company, a reflection of the formidable CEO he knew. Charlotte met his gaze, her red-rimmed eyes now blazing with a fierce, quiet intensity, the Ice Queen briefly resurfacing with a new human motivation. I need to properly thank you, Ethan, she stated firmly, not with empty words or platitudes, but with tangible, concrete actions that truly reflect the magnitude of what you risked for me. A declaration that was clearly a promise of a life-changing, massive corporate reward that he had never in a million years anticipated. If you believe that some people are truly worth risking everything for, hit subscribe right now, because only people without hearts will scroll past when a little girl's life is about to be in danger. The emotional tension in the hospital room, a mixture of profound gratitude and unspoken fear, was almost suffocating, leaving Ethan with a deep, unsettling feeling that the danger was far from over, that Victor's escape was merely a pause in the terrifying saga. The police will surely catch him soon, Ethan tried to reassure her, though the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. I hope so, Ethan, she replied, a deep current of doubt undermining her words. But what happened next absolutely proved that ordinary, humble people can instantly transform into true, selfless heroes when someone they genuinely care about is suddenly threatened. Stay with me. Exactly 3 days after the brutal, near-fatal alley confrontation, Ethan Hayes was finally discharged from the hospital, his ribs still aching and his arm heavily bandaged, and he fully expected to immediately return to his old, grueling routine. Back to the massive, impersonal warehouse, back to the endless hours of rideshare driving, and back to his perpetually stressed, normal life of scraping by for himself and Lily. Instead, when he arrived at his small, cramped apartment, he found a thick, pristine white envelope waiting conspicuously on his kitchen table, placed there by his sister. Inside was an official letter, printed formally on the intimidating, expensive letterhead of Thornton Logistics, addressed directly to him. The contents were absolutely staggering. Dear Mr. Hayes, the letter officially began, effective immediately. You are hereby permanently promoted to Warehouse Operations Director. Your previous salary will be immediately tripled, reflecting the critical new responsibilities. Your work hours will be permanently changed to daytime only, allowing you the necessary time to spend your evenings with your cherished daughter. A brand new company vehicle will be provided to you. Furthermore, comprehensive health insurance for both you and Lily is now fully and completely covered by the company, with no deductions. The letter concluded with a powerful, emotional clarity that transcended the corporate language. This is not charity, Mr. Hayes. This is not motivated by guilt. This is a profound recognition of the extraordinary kind of man you are, the kind of selfless man I desperately wish I had known existed 10 years ago. With deepest and most sincere gratitude, Charlotte Thornton. Ethan read the letter 3 separate times, the sheer impossibility of the financial and personal freedom it offered finally hitting him, and he silently sat down heavily on his worn, old couch and cried the deepest, most relieving tears he had wept since his wife had died. That same night, a completely transformed man, Ethan eagerly picked up his daughter Lily from his mother's small, cluttered house, and he immediately took her out to a local pizzeria for her favorite indulgence. A massive, greasy pizza loaded with extra cheese and all the works, a small but important celebration of their new, hopeful future. "Daddy?" Lily said suddenly, her small face completely covered in bright marinara sauce from a giant bite, tilting her head with her characteristic, thoughtful concentration. "Are you genuinely okay? You look completely different now." "Different how, baby?" Ethan asked, suddenly intrigued by his daughter's sharp, innocent observation. "Happy different?" she clarified, articulating a distinction that cut straight to his core, tilting her head again. "Like when mommy used to make you laugh and forget all your worries." Ethan felt an immediate, painful tightening in his throat as the memory hit him. His beloved wife, Megan, had tragically been gone for 4 long, empty years now, and Lily barely retained fragments of her mother. A warm, fleeting laugh, a half-remembered lullaby, the faint, comforting smell of her favorite perfume. Yet, she perfectly remembered the genuine happiness, the distinct, unmistakable look on her father's face when he wasn't constantly carrying the crushing weight of the entire world on his tired, exhausted shoulders. "I am absolutely happy, sweetheart," he confirmed, leaning across the table to gently wipe sauce from her cheek, his voice thick with newfound hope. "Things are truly going to be so much better for us now, I promise you." 18. Leading with respect and a quiet diner lunch, the weeks that immediately followed the promotion were a strange, exhilarating, and completely wonderful whirlwind of change. Ethan threw himself completely into his demanding new role as Warehouse Operations Director, a massive leap in responsibility that both challenged and fulfilled him. He had zero experience in management, yet he learned incredibly fast, fundamentally changing the entire climate of the warehouse by treating his workers exactly the way he had always wished he'd been treated. With profound, genuine respect, with enormous patience, and with the deep, necessary understanding that every single person was relentlessly fighting silent battles that no one else could possibly see or fully comprehend. Charlotte, the CEO, soon noticed the dramatic positive shift in both productivity and morale. She started making conspicuously more frequent visits to the warehouse floor, often standing silently in the main doorway, her arms crossed, studying Ethan as he interacted with the staff, her expression utterly unreadable, a CEO studying a crucial new variable. One afternoon, she made an unexpected move, inviting him to lunch. They didn't go to a fancy corporate steakhouse, but rather to a quiet, unassuming diner near the office, the kind of comfortable, no-frills place a powerful CEO would usually never set foot in. But Charlotte seemed completely at ease in the vinyl booth. She ordered a simple grilled cheese and tomato soup, and in that moment, Ethan realized he was witnessing another, completely stripped-down side of her personality, a rare glimpse of the real woman beneath the corporate armor. "You have truly transformed the entire warehouse operation, Ethan," Charlotte stated simply, stirring her soup with a thoughtful motion. "Productivity has noticeably shot up, employee turnover is dramatically down, and people actually seem to genuinely enjoy coming to work every day. I just treat them like real human beings who deserve dignity." "Charlotte?" Ethan replied, shrugging slightly. That's honestly far rarer in corporate life than you might think." She paused, her eyes looking far off into the distance, deep in thought. "I've been in this cutthroat business for 20 long years, Ethan," she admitted. "And I've always learned that most people, most leaders, lead with pure fear because fear is easy, simple, and effective in the short term. What you are successfully doing, leading with genuine, unwavering respect, that is incredibly hard. That takes a real, profound, internal strength that very few possess." "I had an excellent teacher for that lesson," Ethan said, his voice softening with the memory. "Who was that?" she immediately asked. "My wife, Megan." His voice dropped to a warm, loving murmur. "She passed away 4 years ago from a nasty, aggressive cancer. But before she got sick, she always taught me that people will ultimately remember how you made them feel far more than they'll remember what you actually did. She always said that kindness wasn't any form of weakness. It was, in fact, the only real, true, sustainable power any of us possessed in this world." Charlotte remained quiet for a long, reflective moment. "She truly sounds like a remarkable, extraordinary woman," she finally said. "She was truly remarkable," Ethan confirmed, looking down at his scarred, strong hands, the physical evidence of his life's struggles. "After she died, Charlotte, I honestly nearly fell completely apart, entirely consumed by grief. But I had Lily. I couldn't allow myself to fall apart because she desperately needed me to remain whole. So, I forced myself to get up every single day, and I relentlessly did the necessary work, even when I absolutely didn't want to, even when every part of my mind and body was screaming with pain. That is precisely what I also did after Victor." Charlotte's voice dropped, raw and honest, her eyes locking onto his with a deep understanding. "Except I didn't have a Lily to anchor me. I only had these towering, cold walls that I built." They sat together in a profound, comfortable silence, not awkward, but filled with the silent, shared understanding of two people who profoundly knew what it meant to fight through life's deepest trauma and survive it. "I am genuinely glad you are here, Ethan," Charlotte said at last, a tiny, genuine smile touching her lips. "Not just because of the incredible thing you did for me that night, but because you constantly remind me that not every person in the world is a dangerous, lethal monster." "Most people aren't," Ethan replied gently, mirroring her smile. "They're just profoundly scared, including me, especially you." He smiled gently. "But you are definitely getting much better at being human." The precious peace they had both found lasted for exactly 2 short, wonderful months. Then, the nightmare figure of Victor Crane, the relentless predator, came back into their lives, darker and more terrifying than before, shifting his lethal focus. Ethan was performing the daily ritual of picking Lily up from her elementary school, a small, brightly colored brick building in a quiet residential neighborhood, when he first noticed the car parked directly across the street from the main entrance. A sleek, black sedan with heavily tinted windows, its engine idling subtly, a ghost in plain sight. It had also been there yesterday, he suddenly realized, and the day before, a terrifying pattern emerging. A sickening, familiar knot of ice immediately tightened in his gut, the primal fear of the hunt returning instantly. That very night, after Lily was safely asleep, snuggled beneath her favorite unicorn blanket, Ethan found a small, unmarked envelope tightly taped to his apartment door, hidden beneath the welcome mat. It bore no stamp, no return address, just a chill of professional menace. Inside, he found a shocking, high-quality photo of Lily, completely unaware, playing innocently on the school playground swings. On the back, a single, terrifying line was scrawled by hand. "Give me Charlotte's home address, or next time I won't just take pictures." Ethan's entire world turned instantly into absolute, icy horror. He didn't sleep a single minute that night, sitting rigidly in the dark living room, his muscles tight with tension, a heavy Louisville Slugger baseball bat, a remnant from his youth, lying menacingly beside him, his mind racing through every conceivable, desperate option. In the early morning, driven by a raw, paternal fury, he drove directly to Thornton Logistics, storming past the startled receptionist and the hesitant security guard, heading straight for Charlotte's opulent, private office. She looked up from her enormous desk, her expression startled. "Ethan, what in the world is terribly wrong?" Charlotte asked, standing up quickly, her eyes wide with alarm. He slammed the door shut and silently handed her the terrifying photo of Lily. All the color drained instantly from her face, and she whispered, "No, no, no. This is impossible. He's been watching Lily's school." "Charlotte," Ethan stated, his voice a low, fierce growl. "He wants your home address, and he is now ruthlessly using my daughter as leverage to get to you." Charlotte's hands immediately shook violently, consumed by self-recrimination. "This is all my fault, Ethan," she cried. "I brought this danger right to your door. I should have stayed completely away from you. Stop it right now." Ethan's voice was firm, silencing her guilt. "This is absolutely Victor's fault and only his. We are going to strategically handle this together as a team." They went immediately to the Chicago PD, filing detailed reports, obtaining temporary restraining orders, and hiring expensive, private security for Lily's school and their homes. All of it paid for instantly by Charlotte without a single word of discussion. But Victor, the cunning, ruthless predator, was smart. He stayed just far enough outside the legal boundaries to avoid immediate arrest, yet just visible enough to be a constant, terrifying reminder that he was relentlessly watching. 2 agonizing weeks later, the terrifying game ended suddenly. Ethan was home with Lily, calmly making dinner, when he heard the distinct, loud sound of glass violently shattering upstairs. "Lily, hide now," he commanded, his voice eerily calm but intensely urgent. "Under your bed, baby. Do not come out until your daddy tells you to." She ran instantly, a good, brave girl. Ethan snatched up the baseball bat, his jaw set, and moved toward the top of the stairs. Victor stood waiting at the top landing, a massive knife gleaming in his hand, his face a terrifying mask of twisted, pure rage. "You absolutely should have just walked away, friend," Victor sneered, his voice chillingly low, radiating pure malice. "I generously gave you a chance to save yourself, and you should have stayed exactly where you belonged. Rotting in prison?" Ethan snarled back, tightening his desperate, white-knuckled grip on the heavy bat. The sheer magnitude of the stakes, Lily's life, Charlotte's freedom, stripping away all his fear, leaving only a white-hot, singular focus. "But here we both are," he finished, before Victor charged instantly, a blur of pure, lethal aggression. The fight that ensued was brutal, loud, and sickeningly messy, unfolding in the narrow hallway directly outside Lily's room. Ethan immediately took a long, deep slash across his right forearm, a massive spray of crimson blood instantly decorating the wallpaper. But he quickly retaliated, landing a crippling, bone-shattering hit with the bat to Victor's exposed knee, followed by a fierce blow to the ribs, and finally, a devastating, skull-cracking smash to the side of the attacker's head. Victor instantly went down hard, hitting the floor with a heavy, final thud. Ethan, ignoring the agonizing, burning pain in his arm, quickly pinned the defeated man to the floor, pressing the thick, heavy baseball bat mercilessly against Victor's windpipe. "If you ever come near my daughter or Charlotte again," Ethan rasped out, his voice completely raw, barely sounding human, "I promise you, I will personally kill you myself. Do you absolutely understand what I am telling you?" Victor simply gurgled, a pathetic, strangled noise that might have been a final, definitive yes. The loud, piercing wail of police sirens immediately screamed outside, neighbors having swiftly called 911 upon hearing the violent, terrifying sounds of the shattering glass and the brutal struggle. Within minutes of the siren's arrival, Victor Crane was securely placed in handcuffs, his defeated body roughly dragged out of Ethan's home for what everyone knew would be the very last time. The long, terrifying nightmare finally, brutally concluded. Charlotte Thornton arrived at the house only 20 frantic minutes later, having sped across the city, bursting desperately through the front door, rushing past the uniformed police officers who were securing the scene, ignoring the paramedics who were meticulously cleaning and stitching the deep, gaping wound on Ethan's forearm, and pulling him instantly into a hug so tight and fiercely protective that he momentarily couldn't take a full breath. "He's absolutely gone, Ethan," she whispered into his shoulder, her voice thick with immense, profound relief. It's finally and completely over for good. It's finally over, Charlotte. Ethan weakly agreed, returning the life-affirming, desperate hug. Slowly, silently, Lily crept out from her hiding place beneath the bed, her small body trembling slightly, and she immediately looked at the gruesome scene. The fresh blood smeared on the wall, the shards of broken glass scattered across the carpet, and the tired, grim-faced police officers filling her hallway. "Daddy?" Her voice was tiny, heartbreakingly small and uncertain. "Are you truly okay now?" Ethan immediately knelt down painfully, completely ignoring the fiery, throbbing pain in his wounded arm, and pulled her gently against his chest. "I'm completely okay, baby," he reassured her, his voice absolute with conviction. "Everything is perfectly okay now, I promise you." Lily then looked directly at Charlotte, her small brow furrowed in concentration. "Are you Daddy's new friend?" Lily asked Charlotte directly, her small, innocent voice cutting through the remaining tension and the aftermath of the violence. A simple question demanding a profound, complicated answer. Charlotte immediately smiled, a sudden, bright, genuine flash of light through her fresh tears, and she gently wiped her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, I absolutely am your daddy's best friend," she replied, her voice filled with a powerful, unfamiliar emotion, one that was far deeper than mere business acquaintance. Lily solemnly nodded, completely satisfied with the simple, true answer. Then, she walked slowly over to Charlotte and wrapped her tiny arms tightly around the CEO's legs, an act of pure, unforced childlike trust that instantly shattered all of Charlotte's remaining emotional defenses. "Thank you so much for finally making Daddy happy again," Lily said simply, her voice muffled against the expensive fabric of Charlotte's trousers, a devastatingly profound statement that encapsulated the entire, brutal journey. Ethan watched his daughter spontaneously embrace the complex, powerful woman whose life he had twice saved, the woman who had, in turn, saved his career and his soul, and in that intensely emotional moment, a sudden, complete realization washed over him. They were no longer simply just a rescuer and a survivor, no longer just a boss and an employee, but something infinitely more profound. They were, in the truest, most complete sense of the word, family, bound by trauma, courage, and a deep, unspoken love. 6 profound months later, the physical and emotional scars had begun to fade, and Charlotte Thornton stood regally at the head of a massive, polished conference room, addressing the entire senior staff and key personnel of Thornton Logistics. The Ice Queen facade permanently melted away, replaced by a leader who spoke with genuine, heartfelt humility. "For many years, I led this vast company using fear and absolute control," she publicly stated, her voice strong but infused with a new, raw honesty. "I truly believed that fear and control were the only things that made me truly strong, the only way to succeed in a brutal world. I was profoundly, absolutely wrong." She paused for dramatic emphasis, letting the magnitude of her public confession settle over the room. "True strength, I have learned, is not rooted in control or fear. It is inherently about trust. It is about showing up consistently and reliably for each other when the stakes are highest. And it is about immediately recognizing that we are all fundamentally human, and we all, without exception, desperately need help sometimes." She then turned her head, her gaze sweeping the entire back of the room until her eyes immediately found Ethan, standing quietly by the door, and she offered him a small, deeply meaningful and appreciative smile. "Someone extremely special taught me that crucial lesson," she continued, her voice radiating gratitude. "Someone who bravely risked absolutely everything he had for a complete stranger. Someone who constantly reminded me that genuine kindness is not a weakness to be exploited. It is, in fact, the only real, true, and enduring power any of us will ever possess in this life." A massive, sustained applause erupted spontaneously throughout the entire room, the volume a profound validation of both her transformation and his heroism. Charlotte gracefully stepped down from the grand podium, the applause ringing loudly in the air, but the corporate accolades were now merely background noise to her. That very evening, the three of them, Lily, Ethan, and Charlotte, shared a quiet, intimate dinner together in Ethan's small but now comfortable apartment, a scene of simple, profound domesticity that had become a cherished weekly ritual. It was explicitly not a formal date, nor was it remotely romantic in the traditional sense. It was simply a deeply comfortable gathering of a chosen, non-traditional family, a powerful bond forged in shared violence and selfless heroism. Lily, entirely at ease with the formidable CEO, enthusiastically showed Charlotte her latest, brightly colored crayon drawings, detailing her imaginary adventures. Charlotte, in turn, sat patiently with Lily, helping her quietly and meticulously with her difficult second-grade math homework, displaying a side of her personality that no board member or competitor would ever witness. Ethan stood at the stove, making his famous spaghetti, Lily's favorite, loaded with meatballs, and he watched the two most important women in his life laughing together at a mistake in the homework, a genuine, joyful sound, and in that simple, beautiful moment, he felt a profound, warm completeness that he hadn't experienced since his wife Megan had passed away for long, empty years ago. His heart, long broken and burdened by constant worry, felt perfectly, wonderfully whole again. Later that evening, after Lily's small light had finally been switched off and the apartment had settled into a comfortable, profound silence, Ethan and Charlotte sat quietly together on the small, worn porch, enjoying the cool night air and the soft, diffused glow of the distant city lights. "You effectively saved my life twice, Ethan," Charlotte confessed softly, leaning her head gently against his broad, comforting shoulder, her voice filled with deep emotion. "Once directly from Victor's deadly knife, and then a second time, much more profoundly, from the cold, emotional prison I had built completely around myself. You saved mine too, Charlotte," Ethan immediately replied, his voice equally soft, his eyes fixed on the distant, faint stars visible above the towering city skyline. "You gave Lily her real father back, the one who is now completely unburdened, the one who actually has the necessary time and emotional energy to properly be there for her, completely present." Charlotte didn't move her head from his shoulder, simply remaining in that comforting, platonic proximity. "Not romantic proximity," she murmured, articulating the boundaries of their deep bond. "Just pure, necessary comfort and safety." "What ultimately happens for us now, Ethan?" she asked, the question hanging delicately in the cool night air, a question about their shared, uncertain future. "We simply keep going," Ethan replied instantly, his answer a testament to his simple, enduring strength. "We keep relentlessly showing up for each other. We keep being this family." "I truly like that idea," Charlotte said softly, the quiet words carrying the weight of a lifetime of solitude and abandonment. "I never really had a stable, true family that lasted before this moment." "You definitely do now, Charlotte," Ethan reassured her, his powerful arm subtly and instinctively shifting to fully embrace her shoulder, offering silent, rock-solid promise of unconditional support. They sat in a profound, deep silence for a long time, watching the distant, faint stars slowly navigate their predictable, silent courses across the black, immense canvas of the urban sky. They were, in many complex ways, two profoundly broken people, a working-class single father, scarred by loss and years of relentless, back-breaking labor, and a ruthlessly driven, wealthy CEO, brutally shattered by violence and emotional isolation, who had miraculously found each other at the precise, crucial moment when their lives were simultaneously at their absolute lowest point of vulnerability. Some complex, extraordinary people walk unexpectedly into your tightly controlled life and, with a single, seismic action, completely change everything about it, altering the entire trajectory and meaning of your existence forever. Some rare people truly show up when you are at your absolute lowest, most desperate moment and simply refuse to leave you to fight alone. Some profoundly selfless people are willing to courageously risk everything they possess for a complete and total stranger, not because of a grand political ideal, but simply because they innately and deeply understand that all of us are intrinsically connected, all of us are relentlessly fighting our unique battles, and all of us are simply trying desperately to survive. Ethan Hayes was undeniably that truly selfless person for Charlotte Thornton, the unexpected guardian who emerged from the darkest shadows of a Chicago alley, sacrificing his physical safety and risking his family's security for her survival. an act that fundamentally redeemed her faith in humanity. And in a beautiful, poetic twist of fate, Charlotte Thornton became that same, critical person for Ethan Hayes, not only financially elevating his life but profoundly saving his soul and his spirit, giving him back the invaluable time and energy to become the present, loving father his daughter desperately needed, completely restoring the profound happiness that loss had brutally stolen from him. Their improbable, powerful connection was a living testament to the fact that heroism is not found on a battlefield or in a boardroom, but in the single, gut-wrenching choice to stand up for the vulnerable, even when the personal cost is immeasurably high. This entire complex story, a testament to unexpected grace and profound, selfless courage, is a powerful reminder that the best of humanity often emerges from the darkest of circumstances, proving that one simple, good choice can literally create an entire, new, and beautiful world. If this truly powerful story profoundly moved you, please hit subscribe now and immediately share it with someone you deeply care about who needs to hear this story of hope and redemption. Comment protector right now if you profoundly believe that the single bravest thing any of us can ever do is choose to stand fearlessly between imminent danger and the vulnerable people who desperately need our unwavering strength. The story of Ethan Hayes, the former factory worker turned corporate director, and Charlotte Thornton, the ice queen who finally melted into a loving human being, is much more than just a tale of violence and redemption. It is a profound, living parable about the quiet, fierce power of empathy. Many define strength by the wealth one accumulates, the power one wields, or the ability to intimidate others. But the true strength, the kind Ethan demonstrated in that cold Chicago alley, doesn't come from what you gain, but from what you are willing to lose for another person. He had everything to lose, his job, his freedom, and most importantly, his daughter, Lily. Yet he chose to intervene. He personified what it means to have an unwavering character. He understood that in a just society, the only real responsibility we have is to be the protectors of those who, for one reason or another, cannot protect themselves. This is not an easy choice. It is a choice that demands the courage to reject fear and embrace altruism. The central point of this brutal journey, the collision of two such disparate worlds, is the unshakable truth that genuine love is the only antidote to crippling fear. Charlotte spent a decade building walls, using corporate coldness as an impenetrable armor. She believed that loneliness was the only form of security, because if no one got close, no one could ever hurt her again. The fear of Victor was a poison slowly killing her. But what Ethan brought was not money or power. It was the vulnerability of pure kindness. It was living proof that human connection is worth the risk. Fear breeds isolation. Empathy, on the other hand, breeds community and belonging. Charlotte's transformation, from a corporate predator to a warm, maternal figure, shows that healing from trauma is not a solitary process. It is found in renewed trust, unconditional support, and the willingness to let someone see your pain. The journey of Ethan and Charlotte proves that the highest form of success in life is not measured by material wealth or corporate power, but by the depth of your personal character and the unwavering willingness to commit a selfless act for a person who cannot possibly repay you. Only those who have completely given up on the foundational goodness of humanity will scroll past this message without sharing it. For somewhere, right now, someone is watching this entire video. That person might be feeling utterly alone, terribly scared, and deeply defeated, and they absolutely need to know, in the core of their being, that there are still profoundly good, courageously selfless people like Ethan Hayes left in this complicated world. Share this story. Be the person who shows up when it truly, profoundly matters. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel right now if you believe in the power of kindness.